Hi everyone, Quiveen here from the comfort of my kitchen. In today's video, we are going to be looking at some conjunctions, some close conjunctions and just conjunctions that are happening over the course of the month of March. But just before we take a look ahead to those, we're going to get rid of the atmosphere and the ground so we can take a look at the moon on the opposite side of the sky. We're here on the 3rd. This video should be going up at 6 o'clock UTC, whereas the lunar eclipse that happened on this date, on the 3rd, would have happened back at, well, we're looking here at almost 12 o'clock UTC. This would be pretty close to the end of the eclipse. If we move back a little bit further, you can see that even back here for 11 o'clock UTC, that's about the time that the eclipse, the lunar eclipse, began for UTC, but on the opposite side of the planet. So for local time, this eclipse would be happening, well, if you're in the middle of the Pacific, very, very close to midnight at slightly different times if you're either side of the Pacific in Asia or in North America. So that is the eclipse. We've already taken a look at that eclipse. There's a whole video, the last video on this channel, all about that particular total lunar eclipse. There will be another lunar eclipse, not quite total, coming up later in the year, and of course a solar eclipse as well. I hope you got to see the lunar eclipse, the total lunar eclipse that just happened today. If you didn't get a chance to see it, you can take a look at one of my previous videos and get an idea of what it would have looked like from there. So we're moving into nighttime for this evening, and just as the sun is setting, we can see Saturn just above the sunset. Venus is out there as well. If we come back a little bit, we might catch Venus. There we go, a little bit earlier in the evening. Venus is just there visible at almost just after 6:30. So there's Venus. There is Saturn, and in a few days they will be closer together. So looking forward here to the 6th, we can see Venus and Saturn very close together. Unfortunately, with these bushes in the way, we can't see them both at the same time. So we'll get rid of the trees and bushes for this particular conjunction, or really set of conjunctions. You do want to be down at the coast or on top of a tall building, somewhere where you won't have anything blocking your horizon. Even with the sky completely clear, we're only seeing Venus and Saturn here. And we can see here on the 7th, Venus and Saturn are pretty close together, still very close together on the 8th, and then they start moving away from each other. So really here on the 8th, this is the conjunction that you will see with your eyes, or at least could see with your eyes. However, back here on the 7th, if we take a much, much closer look, there is Neptune. So we've got this pretty close conjunction of 3 objects in the sky. Really, Venus and Neptune are having quite a close conjunction, and Saturn and Venus, their conjunction is a little bit more distant. If we take a look at where Neptune is here, we can see, we may need to pull back just a little bit, we can see that Venus and Neptune are pretty close on the 7th. On the 6th, Venus seems to be just on the other side of Neptune. So this means that this conjunction, what we're seeing is just a conjunction here in Ireland. It could be a closer conjunction from other locations around the world. So if we move back into daytime for us here in Ireland, there we go. This is a very close conjunction between Venus and Neptune. You can see they're practically on top of each other in the sky. So that is a very close conjunction happening at 11 o'clock UTC. So again, close to midnight if you're in the Pacific. If you're down in the Pacific, around the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you will be able to see this much closer version of the same conjunction. Venus will be just after moving a little bit further ahead in its orbit by the time it's visible for us here in Ireland, hours and hours later. You can see here just about 7:30 when everything should still be above the horizon. Yep, but with that glow of a little bit of a glow of sunset still, making it a bit more difficult to see. We can see that as Venus moves kind of up and away from Saturn, it's not as close to Saturn at any point. So the conjunction between Venus and Saturn won't be as close as the conjunction between Venus and Neptune. And this is just down to their relative positions in the sky. I have a feeling that Neptune's pretty close to being on the ecliptic and Saturn is maybe a little bit off, but it's very hard to tell. All of the planets even though they roughly follow the ecliptic, none of them exactly follow the ecliptic. They all appear a little bit off at different times of their years and also a little bit of our year. So that's Venus and Saturn at sunset. There will be, for some locations on Earth, another conjunction happening at sunrise, but that's only going to be visible from certain locations on Earth, if any. That's something that I'm going to have to check. Instead, we're going to move forward to a conjunction between the Moon, Jupiter, and Pollux in Gemini. So here we have on the 26th, oh, shooting star, always nice to see. We've got Jupiter, the Moon, and Pollux. This is how they would appear just as the Sun is setting, and we can see that Venus has now gotten a lot easier to see. It's much further from the Sun at sunset. It's also moved a little bit, or really the sunset has moved a little bit relative to these bushes, because we're continuing to move towards summertime. And here we are looking at the sky, just starting to get dark, still not truly dark at 8 o'clock. So we're finally getting back to longer days. Taking a look up here at the Moon, Jupiter, and Pollux, we'll zoom in just a little bit. This is how they will appear as the sun is going down, pretty much in a straight line. If we follow them across the sky until they set, just about here, we'll get back from that tree, you can see that they're no longer in line. So I've used this, basically this exact same conjunction happened over the previous months, and it's a good example of how much the moon moves even in the course of just one night. If you can go out at sunset and go out again just a few hours later, just a little bit past midnight, we'll come back a little bit, even here about 1 o'clock, the moon has noticeably moved in the space of just a couple of hours, because the moon does move quite fast, definitely quite fast compared to the planets and the stars in our sky. But it's a particularly good view of the moon. It's just past a half moon here, so we can see a lot of the cracks and craters. Just past the perfect half moon. So there's the perfect half moon on the 25th, and here it is on the 26th, just a little bit wider. All of the shape that I call the football player on the moon is visible. This section here is the body of the football player, or the Sea of Tranquility, to give it its proper name, and we can see all of the cracks and craters there along the side. So it's a great time to look at the moon, and it's in this wonderful position right in between Pollux and Jupiter. So we have this nice straight line of bright, recognizable objects. The moon is going to have a close conjunction with Regulus a little bit later as well. So this motion of the moon is another great example of something roughly following the ecliptic. If we come back to here, and we'll stop following the moon quite so closely, but we can see the moon moving from pretty close to the planets up through Aries, up into Taurus, and then across into Gemini. This is still the top of Taurus here. So even though the Hyades and the Pleiades are what we might recognize as Taurus, Taurus continues all the way up to here, where the moon is on the 24th, then coming through Gemini on the 26th, and here we are right next to Regulus on the 29th. And I believe something very similar to the close conjunction between Venus and Neptune is happening here. So we're seeing the moon just a little bit past Regulus at just almost 9 o'clock. But if we move around the time a little bit, so as we move forward, get later in the night, the moon will continue drifting away from Regulus. But if we come back, for us here in Ireland, it's just as the sky gets dark enough, just as things get dark enough to be visible, you can just about see Regulus there peeking out from the moon. So Regulus will be sort of revealed by the moon just as the sky gets dark for us here in Ireland. We'll come back to here, just after 8 o'clock. So this is quite bright. Regulus wouldn't really be visible to the naked eye for us here in Ireland. If you are in a different location, and you can see we've gone into summertime here, so we're now at UTC +1 instead of UTC. That's an unfortunate quirk of daylight savings, making everything a little bit harder to track time-wise. But there we go, Regulus being revealed by the moon. It's happening for us just barely as the sky gets dark enough for these things to actually be visible. But if you are in a different location, that occultation of Regulus, not just a conjunction, but an occultation, is going to look great. Moving forward to morning time, we've got our last conjunction. You may have just seen Mercury there, at least the name Mercury popping up just ahead of the sunrise. Mars is in there as well, and I pointed this out in a recent video. Here are Mercury and Mars right there on the same side of the sun. We can see here by nearly the end of March, we've also moved around the sun to such a degree that we're seeing Saturn on the opposite side of the sun to where we were seeing it earlier. That is mostly down to the Earth's motion. Saturn moves very, very slowly, so it doesn't contribute as much to that changing position. Coming back here, we can see Mercury and Mars getting pretty close together, quite close together there on the 15th, but they're also quite close to the sun. So to see this, we're going to have to go, again, pretty much to the equator. And I say pretty much because the equator is down here. We are now in northern summer, or according to UTC, we're back in northern winter. That's okay. We're still very close to northern summer, closer to northern summer than we are to northern winter. So we would expect the subsolar point, the area on the Earth that's directly under the sun, to actually be a little bit north of the equator, somewhere around here. Now, I might be going a little bit far there because we're not all the way into midsummer yet, but not as close to the equator as you might think. So we're going to go into West Africa here. That should bring us certainly close enough. We may want to go a little bit further. Let's see what happens when we turn back on the atmosphere. Yeah, Mercury and Mars still not visible. And they're still tilted that way to the south. So we do need to go closer to the equator. That's okay. We'll go down still. Yeah, okay. We're just on the equator here. Just exactly on the equator. There's Mars, hinting that it would be visible to the naked eye. And Mercury. So there's Mercury and Mars on the 15th, quite close together, only visible when they're very close to the horizon, and only visible from, well, in this case, we're exactly on the equator, but close to the equator should do. Now, we're going to move south of the equator as well, a good jump to the south, just to see, yeah, that looks more vertical because of the way that the Earth is tilted and where the sun is actually shining. There's Mercury and Mars visible further from the horizon when we are a little bit south of the equator. So that should be a particularly good view for anyone at this latitude, about 18 degrees south. You should get a pretty good view of Mercury and Mars in the morning. Unfortunately for us here in Ireland, that's not going to be possible. They're too close to the sunrise. The angle makes it impossible for us to see. But at least you got to see it here. And thankfully the other conjunctions, the occultation between the moon and Regulus, we'll only see it as a conjunction here in Ireland, but it will be a particularly close one, a nice one. And here we are coming up to sunrise, almost at sunrise. And the moon is still just there next to Regulus. So we will get to see the moon and Regulus being very close together. It almost looks like an occultation from here in Ireland, but it will be an occultation from other areas around the world. We can see Jupiter and Pollux and the moon forming that nice straight line. And if you are close enough to the coast, if you have a flat enough horizon, then you should be able to catch the close conjunction between Venus, Saturn and Neptune, even if only Venus is actually reasonably easy to see. So I hope you get to see some of those conjunctions. For the ones that you aren't able to see, I'm glad you got to see them here. If you enjoyed this video, then please do like it. And if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you'd like to read some of this information written down, you can do so on my website, queevinscontent.ie. Thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you back here next time.